Hello, hello. Thank you for listening to some music with me. Um that was Hold On by Yola. I am so glad to be here with all of you. I'm so appreciative that you're all here. What a thing it is to be together. My name is Liz Loeb. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. I'm here on Dakota land in my home in Northeast Minneapolis, which I share with my spouse, Sarah, and our toddler, Lyra. It is toddler bedtime, so you may see a toddler zoom in and out of screen. You may hear strange toddler sounds. I know many of you know how this game goes, but there's no place I would rather be right now than with all of you. And thank you for coming to our first quarterly movement meeting and community gathering. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what to expect tonight, a little bit about what we're doing and why, and then I'm going to help facilitate our agenda. So, what a time, friends. What a time to be people dedicated to justice and to a sustainable planet and to each other. It's been quite a week. And I invite you, as we find ourselves in this space together, to introduce yourself in the chat, to share if you would like something you're holding as you come in to the Zoom to this space tonight. I can't imagine any of us have made it through the past week without feeling some part of ourselves unsettled. And so I can't think of anything more important than to be together, asking how we can take action, asking how we can connect with one another, asking how we can show up meaningfully in our local communities. Our neighbors really need us and we really need each other. And however the world feels to you right now, I know that we are powerful together. And I know that the actions we take together matter and will shape our world. So I feel some extra energy about how special it is to be together tonight. We have launched this series of movement meetings and community gatherings, which we will do 4 times a year, quarterly, at the change of the seasons. So the next one will be around the spring equinox. The one after that will be the summer solstice, the fall equinox, the winter solstice, and so on. Because as our work as a climate justice movement grows, I think sometimes it's easy to feel like you're not quite sure where all the pieces are landing. And even for folks who are really active, it can be hard to know exactly how all the pieces connect or where the piece that you're holding fits. And for folks who are newer or who are coming in from other places, it can be hard to know, where do I fit in? What's happening? Where can I take actions that matter to me? And so we want to meet once a season to give you an overview of our work and to give you concrete opportunities to show up and to take action. And also, we want to give ourselves the opportunity to hear from one another and to hear some framing about this moment and what's happening in the world around us. So tonight, we're going to receive some movement framing from Arif Mamdani, who I'll introduce in a moment. We're going to hear an overview of MNIPL's work in the world and how it fits together right now. We're going to hear a spotlight about our community resilience hub work. We're going to hear a spotlight about our work around the rights of manoomin, psin, wild rice, and the legislative session. And then I will wrap up by making clear the action steps that we can take together. We'll see if we have time, I hope we do, to do some question and answer. And then you'll be on your way by 8:15 Central Time, knowing that time on the clock is a construct, and it is the construct we will use in this moment so we can help you plan your evening. Please feel free to use the chat if you have questions, if you have curiosities, if you have wonderings. We're recording this meeting. We will send out a recap email with resources. How does that sound as a way to move through our evening together? Amazing. I'm not seeing any immediate questions in the chat, so I hope some find their way there. I love scrolling through and seeing all of your faces. It is such a delight. So with that, I have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing my comrade and my colleague and my dear friend, Reverend Arif Mamdani. Arif is a board member of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. Arif is a Unitarian Universalist minister. Arif is someone who has worked deeply within social movements for decades and has held a number of leadership positions locally and nationally in social movement work. And more than anything, Arif is somebody who I experience as tending to the heart work, and the body work of what it takes to yearn towards justice, even as he also brings in the intellectual and cognitive work that it takes. So I learned so much from Arif and from the way he carries his own spirituality towards imagining a world that we can live in together. And I'm so delighted that we get to hear from him around some framing for this moment before we move into talking about our specific work together. So with that, I'll hand it over to Arif.
Thanks so much, Liz. You made me blush with that introduction. It is good to be with you all tonight. My name, as Liz said, is Arif Mamdani. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am affiliated with First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, but I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I'm not here in any capacity other than as a member of this community, as someone who cares deeply about climate justice, someone who is watching what's unfolding from our federal government with horror, with terror, with rage, and more grief than I often have the capacity to feel. And I know that I'm not alone in that. It is so good to be with you all tonight, virtual as we may be. We have the benefit of being able to connect over vast distances. I checked in with Liz this morning. We compared notes about the state of our movements in this moment, and our consensus is that right now, most of us are freaking out on some level. Yeah, there's the rapid response work. Folks are defending from the attacks that have been contained in these executive orders. Folks are preparing to defend those attacks that are expected. And even folks who expected things to be bad, even folks who felt like they were paying attention, the scale of attack, the scale of the attempted power grab, the impact on human beings, people who we care about, our neighbors, the land. It's heartbreaking. It's horrifying. And even the most hardened of hearts is saying some version of, I need a minute right now. And in a time like this, when we don't quite know which end is up, as Liz and I were talking, I said, Liz, can I share with us a tool that I use to help me try to understand what's true for me? And that tool is tarot cards. Now, disclaimer, y'all. Tarot is not about predicting the future. This isn't divination. This isn't fortune telling. Nobody can tell you what's going to happen. I turn to tarot because tarot cards are archetypes. Old archetypes that have been deployed as a tool for telling stories for a long, long time. In the stories that the cards hold, I think we're invited to look at facets of ourselves. They are a mirror, in a way, that might show us parts of ourselves that we hadn't been paying attention to, or that we hadn't considered it for a while. In the stories, as we receive these stories, we're invited to ask questions. What does this story mean for me? What does this archetype say to me? How is it speaking into my life right now? What questions come for this? Or in more religious terms, how am I being called? So in a way, working with tarot cards is a lot like working with a sacred text. They're stories that show us facets of ourselves. They're stories that have endured for hundreds and thousands of years. And in that showing us facets of ourselves, we're invited to reflect on what and how the stories are speaking to us in the moment that we're in. The deck that I am using for us tonight is the Lineages of Change deck. This is a deck that was created by a team that included Adrienne Marie Brown, who many of you know from her book, Emergent Strategy and or Pleasure Activism. And what I pulled for us this evening is a 3-card spread with cards corresponding to what we're invited to embrace what we're invited to release, and what we are invited to face. And so here are the cards that came up. My invitation is to receive these archetypes, receive these stories, and to listen with each of these for where you feel called and where this particular archetype or reflection is inviting you to engage as you think about the movements that you are most connected with. So the first card that invites us or reflects to us on what we want to consider embracing more deeply, holding more closely, is the Seven of Earth. It is a card that is about patience. It is a card that is about perseverance. It is a card that is about waiting for the blossom. It reminds us that all of life requires a period of waiting for the cells to organize, for the mycelium to find each other within the wood, for faith to be met by fecundity. And the card invites us to get curious about the you that waits, and perhaps to wonder what, even now, in this moment, what is waiting, what is about to be born. So as you think about the movements that you are connected with, as you think about your role in those movements, what would it look like to embrace patience right now, to embrace perseverance, to embrace waiting for the blossom? The second card that I pulled for us, the card that invites us to consider releasing, letting go, is the Mother of Fire. This is a powerful card that speaks of exuberance, initiation, transformation, courage, confidence, spirituality, and sensuality. And this card came up for us in reverse. And in reverse, it invites us to wonder. It invites us to wonder, are we denying the sensual awakening of knowing where we're going, of knowing our own power? It says, don't cut off your life force by pretending that it is small or normal. This, you, are special. And I can't help but thinking about that old Jewish prophet telling his followers that they were the light of the world and not to hide that light. The last card I pulled for us, the card that invites us to face in to something, is the Moon. This is a card that is about darkness, about inner life, about shadow, about gravitational force. It says that we are self-aware, that we are aware of our shadow, that we know our inner life. It says that we need time to get still and to listen, time to pull tides, time to howl into our darkness and to notice where we are in relationship with the moon. Where are you in relationship with the energy of the moon right now? Where are you in relationship to your inner life, your shadow, and what it means to be a gravitational force? And what might it look like for each of us and our movements to bring that energy into our work in this period of time? And so I want to leave you with that invitation. This is a movement moment where many of us are looking for which way to orient, who and how to hold what we hold most true. And I'm looking at the time. I think that we might have a minute or two if anybody wants to share a reflection or a comment in the chat. And I also think I'm inviting Liz to come back in and as your comments come into the chat. Thanks, Liz.
Oh, Arif.
Move us into our next piece here.
Every time, every time I hear you speak in this way, I'm like, something right has happened in the universe that we get to work together. Thank you so much for that offering in a million ways. So as we take that in and we let it flow through us and we invite the reflection that might come, I am also going to invite Sam Blackwell, who is the Director of Strategic Communications with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, to lead us through an overview of MNIPL's work right now and of our programs and campaigns and how they fit together into an interconnected whole. So Sam, first of all, Sam, thank you so much. You do so much to make what we do as a movement possible, and the way you use words and the way you build infrastructure. And I think it is glorious that we get to do this together. And I'm so glad that we have you to help guide us through a map of our work right now. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Liz. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see all of your faces. For folks who don't know me, my name is Sam. I do communications work with MNIPL, and my pronouns are they, them, and he, him, so you can use either of those interchangeably. I am also coming to you from Northeast Minneapolis and excited to be here in space with you all. And Liz has asked me to kind of do an overview of the work that MNIPL is currently doing. For some of you, this might be super familiar because you have been engaged with this work for a long time. For some folks, this might be new information, but hopefully there's something in here that helps remember or helps remind you of the work that we do and why it's all important for all of you to be part of this work. Because MNIPL is not just made up of the staff people who work every day on MNIPL, but it's because of all of the folks like you that show up every single day to move this movement forward. So thank you all for being here, and hopefully you'll find yourself in some of what I'm going to talk about. So the mission of MNIPL, which is Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, is that we work in partnership with faith and spiritual communities and with all Minnesotans to build transformative power and bring the light of people's unique gifts to addressing the climate crisis. So we work a lot with communities of faith, communities of conscience, communities of spiritual practice, and we work with folks who are participating in those communities in order to help build a movement towards addressing the climate crisis and towards advancing climate justice. And we really focus on climate justice as an organization because we think it's really important to remember that the same systems that separate us from the earth also separate us from each other, right? And any solution to climate change must also recognize that the people who are least responsible for climate change are the folks who are experiencing its harshest effects. So we don't just want solutions that continue to benefit the status quo, right? We don't want solutions that continue to benefit the folks who are perpetuating these systems of extraction and greed. And so if we think about how we want to build towards a more sustainable future, we really need to recognize the disparate impacts of climate change on Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, low-income communities, communities in the global South, and others. And our approach to climate justice calls on us to repair the harms that have been created by these systems, right? It's not just about adapting to climate change. It's not just about mitigating the worst effects of climate change. It's also about finding ways to repair not just the world, but also our relationships with each other, because that is at the central piece of why we're doing this work. So those are very lofty goals, right? And we know that there's work that has to get done every single day in order to advance that mission and to really try and bring climate justice into all of the things that we're doing. And the way that we think about climate or the work that we do is through this thing that we call the three-legged stool, right? So there are three legs of this stool that are all equally important in addressing the climate crisis that we're currently experiencing. So the first one is practical, right? There are things that we need to do practically to decarbonize the places that we live and work and where we come together in, right? We also need systemic changes. We need to address the fact that these systems of extraction and greed are causing us to perpetuate these things that are harming the planet and harming each other. And then we also need relational solutions, right? In order for us to be able to move into the future that we want to see, we need to recognize our interdependence with each other, and that solutions that come out of our movement have to be focused on collective action and the understanding that we all need to start making changes in order to be able to move the movement forward. So within these three buckets, we have a bunch of different things that we're working on. And these three buckets are not like mutually exclusive, right? Some of the things that we're doing are all three of these at the same time, right? So it was a little hard as I was making this list to put them in these buckets because I was like, well, this could be this and this. So take all of this with a grain of salt and recognize that all of these things are happening at the same time. So some of the work that we do is through what we're calling our energy transition program. So this is thinking about how do we support people in making changes to decarbonize their electricity, right? So investing in solar projects, helping folks get access to programs that can help them do energy efficiency. We've got work that we've been doing around helping support people who are interested in heat pumps. So thinking about how we can actually decarbonize the spaces where we live and work and get together. We also have Lake Street Solar, which is actually using investments to help organizations get access to solar at very reduced rates that honestly, it feels like a scam because it's so good. So if you are interested, or if your community is interested in solar, please talk to Buff Grace about the Lake Street Solar program because it is fantastic. We have climate justice congregations, which is when we work with communities of faith, conscience, and spiritual practice to identify goals that they have around their work in the climate justice movement. And then we've got Community Climate Resilience Network, which is CCRN, and Buff is going to talk about that in a minute, but that is us trying to build resilience hubs across the state of Minnesota and support organizations in becoming resilience hubs, which will help make sure that when we experience climate disasters, folks have places to go to get resources that they need, and also to serve as centralized places for folks to learn about the climate crisis, to get access to resources, even when the skies are blue. Under the systemic, we have the Rise and Repair Alliance, which is a diverse alliance of individuals and organizations that are trying to advance Indigenous rights and climate justice at the state capitol. We have Leanna Goose here, who's going to talk about some of the work that that group is doing, but MNIPL is actively involved in providing some leadership in that space. We have our own legislative and administrative advocacy. So, we have folks that are at the Capitol trying to advance legislation to support the rights of manoomin psin, as well as legislation that's advancing climate smart investments and insurance. And we do administrative advocacy. So if the PUC is making the decision, the Public Utilities Commission is making the decision that's going to affect Minnesotans, we might also encourage folks to be there to try and move that administrative work as well. And then we have global repair work, right? So this is recognizing that the United States is the largest historical emitter of climate change causing gases, and that we have a responsibility to pay our fair share to repair the harms of that in the global South. So those are the systemic things. We're also working on relational stuff too, right? So building relationships and communities around these issues. We have our reparations learning labs, which are when we talk with folks who are interested in doing active reparations in their communities or in their own spaces, and helping folks decide how they want to do that work. We do education and organizing, so we will often go out to communities and talk about the climate crisis, talk about climate justice. If you're interested in some of that, please let us know so we can send someone out to have a conversation about that. Youth in Power is investing in the next generation of climate leaders and helping make sure that youth voices are at the center of the decisions that we're making around climate, knowing that young people are the generation that is going to be most impacted by the climate crisis. And then Be the Spark, which is a training that we offer to folks about how to organize people within their own communities in pursuit of climate justice goals. So there's a lot that we're doing, right? And we know that all of this work is important. And we also know that this work can't happen without folks like you all in the room, right? So we use Marshall Gans as sort of our organizing framework, our organizing philosophy. Marshall Gans is a well-known organizer. He's currently a professor at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And when Marshall Gans is talking about organizing. It's about practicing leadership, which is enabling others to achieve shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. And we are in some very uncertain times right now, right? There's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that a lot of us are feeling a lot of anxiety over. And what we're inviting you all to do by participating in these conversations and by participating in our work is to help the folks around you feel like they have a shared purpose in the face of that uncertainty, right? In order for us to address the issues of this climate crisis, we're all going to need to step up and figure out how we can support our communities in doing what we need to do in order to advance our work. And so we're really grateful for you all to be here, and we're grateful for your leadership in all of the communities where you might sit. So thank you for being here. And if you have any questions about any of the work that we're doing, I can pause to answer them, or Liz can tell me that we don't have time for that and that we need to move to something else, which is also an acceptable thing, I think.
Sam, that was fantastic. I'm gonna keep us moving forward and invite folks to put questions in the chat with the hope that we'll have time at the end for more interactive question and answers. Also, my goodness, just as you explained that so well, and it reminds me how much we're doing and how interconnected it is. So Sam, if you would put my email address in the chat, I really invite anyone to reach out to me. We can sit down for coffee or tea or a phone call and chat through the substance of this work and how might you particularly, how you might imagine yourself in it, and why it's meaningful to you. And that's something I'd love to ask you about and learn about and hear about. So let that all wash over you. And to add even more, because we are here in the midst of the all, I'm so excited to invite Leanna Goose to speak to us. Leanna will introduce herself, but she is working with the Rise and Repair Alliance to help us organize towards recognizing the rights of manoomin, psin, wild rice in Minnesota state law. Her work is beautiful and necessary, and I feel so lucky that she's with us. So Leanna, I'm hoping you can take 5 minutes to talk to us particularly about our campaign work around the rights of manoomin.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So Buju Nindanawe Magdadu, Leanna Goose, Nindigenous Cause, Makwanindu Dame, Gasagas, Kwajame Cognindu Jaba, Wabik Sing Nindam. Hello, my relatives. My name is Leanna Goose, and my clan is Bear. I am from Leech Lake, and I live in the place of many little flowers right off of Leech Lake. So first of all, I just want to start by sharing an Anishinaabe teaching that states if we care for the nibi or water and manoomin or wild rice, they will care for us. And growing up, my family lived by this teaching. My father showed us how to exercise our treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather. He taught us to live with the seasons and to always be grateful for the gifts that we received. He also taught us to give back and to care for the land. In teaching us how to live on the land, he established a deep sense of responsibility to care for the land around us. And this is a core principle of Anishinaabe culture, caring for the land and understanding that it can care for us. Another core teaching of our culture is ensuring that the next generations have what they need to survive. So I work on a research project called Protecting Manoomin for the Next 7 Generations over the summer, which focuses on studying the impact of invasive species on the Headquarters Bay rice bed on Leech Lake and taking active steps to help manoomin through reseeding efforts. So as a ricer, I have witnessed the loss of manoomin firsthand, and it is especially difficult to see the sacred plant struggling now at a time when my children are just beginning to know it. Wild rice has sustained our people for generations, and now more than ever, it is crucial that we come together to protect this vital resource and the freshwater habitats that sustain it. Wild rice faces many threats, including climate change, pollution, invasive species, and reckless development. When these threats combine, they jeopardize the very existence of this plant. Protecting wild rice in our waters for current and future generations will require collective action. by recognizing the inherent rights of wild rice to exist and thrive, and by implementing protections to uphold those rights, we can work together to create meaningful systemic change. We have the power to push our government to prioritize the health of both people and the planet. Recognizing the rights of wild rice is a critical step in this process, ensuring that both the land and its people are cared for now and for generations to come. Our existence and monomins are deeply intertwined, as we both depend on clean water for survival. By protecting wild rice, we are safeguarding the very foundation of all life, water. So we have found a champion to move this bill through the Minnesota Senate, and we have the approval of all tribes within the state of Minnesota to move forward with legislation to protect wild rice. Environmental, faith, and Indigenous organizations are also behind this movement. And now we really need the people of Minnesota to stand with us and to ask their lawmakers to support protections for wild rice. I also just want to acknowledge the pain and sadness that a lot of us are feeling in this moment as we face a federal administration that is actively working to divide us and disconnect us from the vital work that still needs to be done. But I also want to remind you that now is the time to dig deep and to keep pushing for positive change. We are powerful when we stand together, and we can work towards protecting wild rice, fresh water, and biodiversity within our state. Now is the time for the strongest state level protections. Let's stand together and make it happen. I encourage you all to get involved in the Rise and Repair Alliance and to do what you can to help heal the earth and relationships across our state. Thank you for listening.
Oh, Leanna, thank you so much. Thank you. Friends, we wanted to make sure that we took time tonight to spotlight the campaign to protect wild rice, manoomin, psin, in the Dakota language. It's an inherently awkward thing to ask the law of the colonizer to recognize the indigenous worldview that stewards this land, and it is absolutely necessary. And I'm so proud that we get to say we're part of that. And so before we give you an action step that you can all take towards protecting manoomin on this land, I also want to invite former Senator Patricia Torres to give us a little more context about the legislative landscape in which we're working, just to help us fully feel a little more fluent in how this is moving forward in the context in which it's moving forward at the Minnesota State Legislature. Patricia Torres is one of the most powerful and brilliant people I know. She leads by example. She leads by mentoring young people and young people of color at every turn. And she really knows how a bill becomes a law. Boy, does she ever. So I think we're so lucky that we have her supporting this effort as part of MNIPL and Rise and Repair. So former Senator Patricia Torres, I turn it to you for a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Liz. I am so excited to be here with all of you, and what a great opportunity for me to talk about this amazing work that we do together. I have the privilege now to be working with IPL, advising on really how to maneuver the process at the legislature. And that process obviously includes all of the community organizing that IPL needs to do with the Rise and Repair Alliance, with the people who are here with us tonight. Thank you for your amazing work. So I am going to tell you a little bit about what is happening right now at the legislature, some of the logistics. We have a Senate author, Senator Miri Kunesh, who you probably know well, our only Indigenous senator in the Minnesota Senate right now. We have been meeting with her, reviewing the language that we proposed originally and working with nonpartisan staff to really get to a place where we can have a bill that has all of the components that I'll present in just a minute. At the same time, we're pursuing an author in the House, and we have not been able to secure one yet because you know the controversy taking place in the Minnesota House. The Democrats are trying to figure out how to negotiate their return to the Capitol in a shared power model that was proposed, in which they have half Democrats and half Republicans in each committee, which is fair, which is because that's what the number is. But unfortunately, they want to deny the election to Representative Tabke, who represents the Shakopee area, who won by 12 votes. So we're dealing with that controversy in this moment. And as a result of it, the structure of the House really is not in place for them to make any decision. So we're visiting with our friends, previous people who have worked with us in the past. Lish Kozlowski, that represents the area of Duluth, is aware of this bill. We're pursuing her authorship for the House bill. But in the meantime, we continue to work with members. We're very excited about what we're doing in the Senate, and we need your help to secure the votes in the Senate. We are going to be meeting with Senator Housechild, north of Duluth, where we need to get a little bit of understanding of what this bill does. If you know of any friends that we can reach out to, any persons that know Senator Housechild, we're going to have a meeting with him. Please reach out to IPL and let us know if you would like to attend. That is on February 12th. I will speak very briefly about the language. We received the bill a couple of days ago. We are excited to have it in front of us. And what the bill does is that it really recognizes the landscape, and it names the landscape where wild rice grows. So it calls it wild rice waters. What is interesting about this piece of legislation is that for the first time, we name it. We name the actual place where wild rice grows. And so that will be coded in law. And then we move on into defining how do we protect the waters where wild rice grows, and how do we do enforcement. Then we also move into regulating the use of pesticides in the area. We also move into incorporating the voice of tribal governments into the regulation that governs pesticides and the use of pesticides. For instance, the state of Minnesota now will include the voice of tribal governments in the training that is provided for people who actually use pesticides, and how we train farmers, etc. So all of that chapter around pesticides is drafted to incorporate the voices of indigenous communities in the form of tribal consultations with tribal governments, as well as Indian Affairs Council. That is a very long chapter, really important, and lots of changes in there. And finally, we have also, and the training for pesticides include tribal colleges and colleges where we provide training for the use of pesticides. We also, in an important section of this bill, we define the protection of wild rice. In this policy, the state will recognize the inherent rights of uncultivated wild rice to exist and thrive in Minnesota. And it goes to name what that is. And that is a whole chapter, a whole subdivision defining those protections. And then we finally incorporate some specific language about permits for boating, and training around the rules of how do we post in the maps where wild rice is located, provide to the public information about that, and that basically concludes this. I am happy to talk a little bit more. I don't know, Liz, but we probably don't have enough time. But for those who are interested, there is not a number for this bill, because we just got the jackets. We call the jackets kind of the language that was developed by the staff in the Senate, and we are reviewing it. We will be reviewing it today and tomorrow. with some of our legal advisors and then give a response to Senator Kunish, and she probably will introduce these next week. And when she does, we will be able to get a number and it will be posted and you will be able to access this bill and give us your feedback. And we hope that you are able to participate in the advocacy process. I believe we're going to have some more information about next steps.
Oh, thank you so much, Patricia. I'm going to move us along, but I'll invite you to answer any specific questions in the chat. That was so helpful. That was so thoughtful. Thank you. Friends, I know we're giving you a lot of information and it's a lot of words about a lot of stacking concepts and different technical parts of what we're trying to do in the world. And so here's how it lands for me when I think about what matters the most in this campaign. We have the chance to do right by Indigenous and tribal sovereignty and to do right by our plant relatives. And we have the chance to transform the type of environmental protections that we can create for the land here in Minnesota. That is necessary for our shared future, and it is necessary for our interdependence with one another in the earth. And it is so hopeful. And it allows us to do so much that is good that we yearn for. And the way we are going to make that possible is by showing up together at the state capitol. And so, Sam, will you put up the action slide for the Rise and Repair rally at the Capitol? Great, there it is. Okay, so on March 12th, 2025, we are going to show up by the hundreds at the Capitol in St. Paul to let the legislature know that we care about our land and that we need to protect wild rights, manoomin, psin. If you are able to come to the Capitol, we need you there. If you are able to bring your friends, your community, your congregation, your network, your neighbors, your kids' friends, the people you know, we need you to bring them. We need you to talk to people about this campaign and why it matters. And if you're not able to come in person, there is still so much that you can do. So the QR code is on the screen. You can also go to riseandrepair.org/rally to sign up. You can also just go to riseandrepair.org and join the mailing list to find out all of the ways that you can be part of the momentum and advocacy we need, whether or not you're able to show up in person on March 12th at the Capitol. So you will get all of this information in the recap email. You will hear from me about it again at the end of our time together, but we need you on March 12th to show up with your voices and your bodies, and we need you to show up in all of the other ways that matter. So go to riseandrepair.org, enter your email address, and we'll take the next steps together. So with that, we have one more campaign to highlight before we wrap up for the evening and see if we have time for questions. And that's a campaign that is not happening at the legislature. It's happening in our local communities and in our community centers and with our neighbors and the people we know, person to person. And to say a little bit more about it, I'm thrilled to introduce Buff Grace. Buff is the Director of Faith Networks at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. He has decades of experience in this work. Buff is a steady and deep presence in what it means to dedicate a life to making a difference. And I'm so lucky I get to work with him. So Buff, thank you for telling us about the Community Climate Resilience Network.
Thanks a lot, Liz. Hey, everybody. It's really encouraging to see so many people on tonight. A lot of familiar names and faces and some new names that I don't know. So it's really exciting. Thank you for encouraging all of us with your presence. I'm part of a team of staff here at MNIPL working on this initiative, including Brett Pence up in Duluth, our greater Minnesota director, Joshua Lewis, our environmental environmental justice organizer, and Julia Nurbin, our executive director. We also have a grant writer helping us with this, Emily Green. So big team at MNIPL working all together on this. Maybe you remember 2010. Where were you in early December 2010? I had been living in Minnesota less than 4 months. And maybe you remember early in December, maybe on like December 2nd, it just started snowing like crazy. And within a few hours, the snow was up to the rear view mirrors on our car. And the reason that was important is that we were living in an apartment that required only street parking, and the plow came by and then the car was completely covered, and we didn't know what we were going to do. To us, coming from a totally different part of the country, closer to the Gulf of Mexico, that was a climate emergency. You can imagine. But we saw Minnesota at its best, and we saw tons of people pour out of their homes and everybody pitch in. It was a bit like a party. Everybody brought their shovels. We all dug each other out of the snowdrifts and laughed and had a good time. And we realized, oh, this is not something to be worried about. Now, you all know that that was not a climate emergency, really. But we, as people in Minnesota and across the world, are now facing real climate emergencies. We're facing droughts, we're facing heat waves, we're facing wildfires, we're facing floods. We've seen the devastation increase year to year. We know it, we see it in the media. And even if we're not talking about something as just crazy Armageddon-ish as something like the Palisade and LA fires or Hurricane Helene in the Appalachians and the kind of destruction there, we still see very dangerous climate emergencies that can happen. So what we want to do, we have this vision of the land of 10,000 lakes being the land of 10,000 resilience hubs. And we think faith communities are a great place to make that happen. We think the faith communities already have the capacities, like those people that turned out to help us dig us out of those snowdrifts. They already have the capacities of the social relationships, the neighborhood relationships, and the trust among one another to become these places that people can turn when there are weather emergencies. And that can be as simple as, our winters are changing, and instead of snow, a lot of times we're getting ice, and the ice forms on the electrical lines, and the electrical lines snap and crack, or the trees crack their limbs and bust out the electric. The people are without power, and that can be really devastating for people who depend on electricity for medical care and health, for refrigeration, for a variety of things. We're seeing heat waves in the cities that are really devastating. The list goes on. But we want to tool up places like the communities that you come from and help you all explore what that looks like in your context. Obviously, a resilience hub in Grand Marais, Minnesota is going to look different than a resilience hub in the rural part of South Central Minnesota. And that's going to look different than, downtown Minneapolis or the suburbs of the Twin Cities. But we think we can facilitate all of us coming together to learn more about this. We're using national partners that have best practices. We're looking at other places around the country that have done this and looking at the way they do it and learning from them and sharing these things with us. So we've got a few things for you to get involved in with that. You can show up on the third Tuesday of every month. We have a gathering. Our next gathering is February 18th. I'll drop the link in the chat for you to register for that. We also are going to be developing what's called a community of practice. This is going to be a additional meeting once a month of faith communities that are really striving to make this happen and taking some specific steps, have some of their leadership on board to really try and experiment with this in their local context, and then share what we learn with one another in these gatherings. That's going to be the community of practice. That'll start up in the springtime. You can email me if you're interested in that. We already have a few communities kind of logging in saying they want to do that, including one up in International Falls. So it will be a really good statewide group, we expect. And then we're also putting together an expert task force. And these will be folks in leadership positions in agencies, first responder networks, municipal government agencies that are tasked with figuring this out. You know, how can we help a climate resilience hub get a solar system and a battery backup so that when the power goes down, they are a source of electricity for people to charge their phones, to get to communicate with one another, have the lights on, have the heat on, feed people, you name it. So we're going to have an expert task force that actually is made up of people that their charge is to figure out how to get specific technologies into locations to kind of really make this work. There's a lot more I could say. I won't. I know we did a kickoff a few weeks ago and many of you were there, and we really appreciate you showing up. But we're excited about this, and this is going to go forward. We've got a lot of applications in for funding, and this is changing, you know, week to week. So stop back by at some of our gatherings, email me or Brett or Joshua if you're interested, and we look forward to being involved with you.
Oh, thank you, Buff. So Buff, if you'll stay on for a moment, it sounds like if somebody wants to get their community involved, they email you, they start a conversation. But if somebody's listening, they say, this is great. What's the next step I can take? Is the thing that they should do to try to come to the event on the 2nd, or is there another way that people as individuals can reach out to get involved? Let's say somebody can't make it on February 2nd. What should they do?
February 18th.
18th, sure. Yep.
They should.
Sorry.
They can email me. We've got a recording of our kickoff event that goes
Great.
more in depth to this whole concept than what I've been, what I've given here, and has some really good national speakers on that kickoff event, so they can get the recording for that. They can, if they can't show up on the 18th, just email me or Joshua or Brett. We'd love to have a conversation with you and get you connected.
Perfect. Thank you, Buff.
You bet.
So friends, we have the links in the chat. You also have a slide up on the screen with a QR code and the URL that you can go to. And if any of that is confusing, just email Buff at Buff, I'm writing it in the chat, at MNIPL.org. Because there are so many ways to come into this, and there's room for communities and individuals, and there's room to just be curious about it and say, I want to find out more. And I'm so excited about the community that's been forming around this. So thank you so, so much, Buff. So friends, that was an hour of us talking. Thank you so much for listening. I want to make sure we have at least a little bit of time for your questions, your thoughts, to bring your voices in. And before I do that, I want to recap our action items. So Sam, this is the time for the recap of action items slide. Oh, thank you, Sam. Sam made all of these slides. They are fantastic for doing that. I am not a slide maker, and I really appreciate it. So first, if you want to support the rights of manoomin, psin, wild rice, if you want to show up at the Capitol and have your voice heard, join us on March 12th for the Rise and Repair Rally Day at the Capitol. And if you can't make it in person, there are so many other ways. Just sign up for Rise and Repair updates. Bring all your friends, tell all your friends, bring your community, bring your congregation or network of spiritual practice. We need the people. Second, if you're looking for ways to build connection in your local community, to build the muscles and responses that we need to face an uncertain world, please be part of our resilience networks. And to do that, you have the QR code on the screen, you have the URL, we have the meeting coming up on the 18th, but mostly you can email Buff and he will be glad to talk to you about it. Similarly, if you have any questions about any of this, if you have questions about the rest of our work, if you want to talk about reparations, please email me. I would love to talk to you. I would love to hear more and to help you find the right way to fit into this work in a way that resonates with you and in a way that feels relevant to your life and what you care about. And finally, to be able to do this work, we need real resources. As we now know more than ever, institutional sources of funding are not going to always be there when we need them to be towards the work of transformation. we have to rely on each other. And we have to share resources to build the community-based grassroots power we need to make change. And so MNIPL, we're able to do our work because hundreds of people give $10 a month, and because hundreds of people give $50 a month. And for so many people, that's such a meaningful commitment of resources and of money. And for lots of people, it means not spending that money on something else, but they know that when you're part of collective action, you have the joy of putting your values into the world with your resources. So we need you to become an MNIPL donor, whether that's with a one-time contribution or by becoming a monthly sustaining donor with a contribution of any amount that's meaningful to you each month. And you can do that by using the QR code on the screen or by going to mnipl.org/donate or by emailing me. I'd love to talk to you about it. So those are our action items. Show up at the Capitol, sign up for Rise and Repair, reach out to Buff about the Resilience Hub, come to the Resilience Hub event on the 18th, become a donor of MNIPL. And with that, we have about 10 minutes for questions. I welcome you to either put your question in the chat or to raise your hand or come off mute. I'll do my best to facilitate the Zoom universe, but I'd love to hear from some of you. You do not have to wait for somebody else to go first. This is a moment when you are enthusiastically invited to come off mute and speak.
I'm going to speak. I'm good at going first. So I'm out here in Faribault, but I really connect with Northfield. And I am delighted that I found two people that, one of them who's right here, up in Northfield, and one of whom I knew when I lived in Duluth years ago. And so I signed up for a couple of things, and we'll see what happens. But it's like, yeah, you are the people I can work with, and so I'm. This is the time for me to get my my hands dirty. I've been, writing and stuff, and so I'm happy that you're here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really fantastic. I'd love to hear from someone else. A question, a reflection, a thought, something you're challenged by, something you're excited by. Yes, Arlene, thank you for raising your hand.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the values of justice in the climate work, and then their enthusiasm and concrete ways to take action that are meaningful. So I think it's what a lot of people are looking for right now, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That feels really good to hear. Thank you.
Liz, this is Deborah.
Yes.
Johnson. With regard to the wild rice issue, what kind of support do you feel there might be already at the legislature? Are you starting from ground zero, or is there already some support?
That is such a good question. So there is support, and many tribal governments have been working on this for years as a matter of climate justice and Indigenous sovereignty. Actually, Patricia, are you still on? Would you like to speak to that question a bit? Did we lose Patricia? We might have.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good. Yay.
We do have significant support, and I think that we probably can secure most of the votes that we need in the Senate. We may need to do a little bit of work with, a couple of senators that may have some questions around some of the regulations for pesticides, but that's, work that we need to do. The most difficult part for this and everything that we need to move forward this year is the divide in the House. And this is where we really, I would like to encourage you to visit a very good website if you don't know who your legislator is. And all you have to do is Google who represents me, Minnesota. If you could do this in just a couple of minutes, just type in your phone, in your computer, who represents me, Minnesota. And that will bring you to a website of the Minnesota House where you can put your address. And you type your address in there and it will come up. Your 2 senators, and it will come up your representative in Congress, in the House, your state senator, and your representative. We really need to hear from you, especially if you're out of the Twin Cities, if you live outside of the metropolitan area and the Twin Cities, and if you are represented by a Republican House member, because we're going to need half and half votes. When we had the majority, you know, we had a lot of friends that we could ask for votes, but now we need half Republicans and half Democrats in order to pass anything in the House. We really need your help. And we feel like we did a lot of education when we tried to pass the resolution last year. So we have a lot of Democratic support, but we're starting the education and the advocacy with Republican members in the House. That is the greatest help you can give us. When you tell us that you're represented by a Republican member, it's a great gift to us, because then we can count on you to help us do that advocacy.
Thank you, Patricia. It's amazing when we email, when we call, when we write a letter, representatives listen. They really do, no matter what political party they're from. It makes such a difference. Don, did I see you with a hand raised?
Yes, I just want to make a quick commercial for Buff. If it wouldn't be for his good work, I don't think our schools in Stillwater would have rooftop solar on a couple of them, as well as the process to get it on all of them when the roofs are redone. And we're hoping that with his help, we'll be successful doing the same at the church I go to in Stillwater.
Aw, thank you for that. If you're somebody who is connected to an institution or a group of homeowners, or simply in your own life, or renters, really anyone anywhere, and your question is, how could I connect to resources for renewable energy at a residential scale or at an institutional building scale, Buff is your person. He knows so much about how to connect to heat pumps, to geothermal, to solar. It's incredible. So please reach out, because that's part of the work we do when we talk about decarbonization and an equitable renewable energy future.
Thanks so much, Don. And shout out to Brett Pence up in the Northland. He's your man up there. He really knows all the contractors up in the Northland and can do just as good or better than me. I sometimes go to Brett to get information, so when I don't know.
Yeah. And Brett's done phenomenal work pooling resources to make sure that folks who have an economic barrier to renewable energy, or folks who are renters, have been able to access low cost or no cost renewable energy in their homes. And it's been incredible, because when we talk about a renewable energy future, it has to be an economically equitable renewable energy future, where wealth isn't what determines access, because otherwise we're just going to reproduce an unjust status quo, and that's not what we're here to do. That's not what we're dreaming of. Any last thoughts or any last questions before we wrap up?
I have one.
Yes, Kathy, yay. I'm so glad you spoke. Yes, Kathy.
I don't know how I'm going to ask this, but I'm just wondering if there's any ways that you integrate in the people's consciousness of all the other species that are not people in the midst of all of these decisions and priorities.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of listening to Leanna talk about what it means to understand all creatures as our relatives, and what it means to be within an Indigenous worldview that truly understands all beings as our relatives. And I think that's also a place where the practical and political work of making change meets our spiritual consciousness. Whether spiritual is a word that's meaningful for some of us and not meaningful for some of us, we all have different ways and different language that we use to mean what we hold most deep. But I think for particularly folks who are not Indigenous, there's a worldview shift that we're being invited into, where we move through this gorgeous, broken, healing universe, knowing that we are a part of everything and that everything is related. So that's not an answer. There is no answer, but it is part of, I mean, it's part of why the campaign for the rights of manoomin, psin, wild rice matters so much, because it's a different way of having our state law relate to that interconnectedness and to the sentience of all beings and our plant relatives as well. So,
well, I just am concerned about people's relationships with all of life. And I used to, when I taught environmental science, I used to use a quotation. I don't want to talk too much here, but from Stephen Jay Gould, evolutionary biologist, who said, "We will not fight to save what we do not love." And I really think that, you know, when I started exposing my students to the outdoors, because a lot of them hadn't had experiences directly with natural systems, even in the middle of the city, it was transformative for them in terms of motivation to understand and to want to do something about what's going on. Anyway, you know all that, but thank you.
Liz, can I ask a super quick question? This is
yes,
Kat.
who's there?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. So I wasn't able to view the slide for some reason about the actions, but that the March 12th rally, 10 to 5, it looks, or 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Is it really all day in order to come and be part of the effort to push the manoomin legislation?
Yeah.
That's a long day.
That's a long time period. Come for any amount of time that you can, because the way the day is structured, we're going to have legislative visits throughout the day where folks can meet directly with their legislatures and use their voice as constituents. And in the middle of the day, we're going to have a big rally in the rotunda with speakers and as a way of coming together. So I am sure that closer to March 12th, we'll have a schedule that you can look at. But always almost, rally at 1:15 p.m. because Owen is organizing this and already knows the schedule, which is fantastic. We always have people coming in and out. It's come for the time you can. It is so valuable, even if you're there for half an hour. And reach out to us, reach out to Owen, reach out to me. We'll make sure that there's a way for your legislator to know that you were there and that this matters to you. So, okay, and again, there's going to be lots of folks who can't be there in person, and we're going to find ways to make sure that you're represented as well. So that's why this is a perfect segue. So thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you.
I'm going to remind you of your action items. Sign up at Rise and Repair. Be there on the 12th or sign up for updates about other ways that you can get involved. Come to a Resilience Hub meeting. Become a sustaining donor. Email a staff member, whether it's me or Buff or Owen or Sam or Analia or Joshua or any of our other incredible staff members or Brett. And we will be in touch with you. We actually answer emails and phone calls. And I didn't mean that in a snarky way. I just mean this is our jobs, is to be here with you and what we make possible together. And so I want to end with so much gratitude. I feel so much energy just from having been here with you tonight and from what it means that even in deeply confusing times and deeply uncertain times, we find our way to each other again and again. And we find our way towards action, And we know that what we do together is meaningful, even when the results are complicated, even when the path is murky. We know that we belong here together, and we know that we are here on this planet to love each other and to find our way towards justice and healing. So I'm going to play a song to send us out. The formal part of our meeting is done. You'll receive an email, a recap, notes, resources. You'll get the action items again. But I'm going to play some music, and I invite you to put in the chat, if you're able, if it feels right to you, something that is giving you hope or something, or something that's giving you hope and strength right now, even if it's hard. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm so grateful for you. Here's a little music. Oh, I can't share my sound because we're sharing a screen. Sam, I think you are fixing that right now because you're amazing. Thank you. All right, let's try this again with a little music.
I'm watching from my window, the curtain coming down. A blue as black as warning, a silence like a sound that rattles at the cages that hold my heart and mind. I call my name to wonder just what I hope to find. A bird so high above the fray, what should he mean to me? His crooked song gone crazy, the swaying arms of trees that wave to me like the hungry, waiting for the tide. My tipping boat still hoping I might reach the other side. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm on my way. Lord, if you love me, keep me, I pray. A little bird is stretching out to the shimmering, shaking blue. Don't know where I'm going, but I know what to do. I don't know the hour that finds me in this room. Dust around my feet and still no sugar in my spoon. But I've only got the taste for something sweet as time. Not bottled on the table, but still hanging on the vine.